In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term, gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Hello, and welcome to the set of Making Known the Unknown. My name is Tarryk. I am the host and producer of this program. As you may or may not have noticed, there are two empty seats next to me. These seats are reserved for two very special gentlemen who will be arriving a little bit later on. These gentlemen are the focus of this program. They, through the information that they have gathered, have put together 25 years of research. The gentlemen that I'm speaking of are Sidney Schwartz, who is a researcher and middle school teacher, and Reverend Hewitt, who is a pastor of a church and a psychic medium. Now, for the past 25 years, these two gentlemen have traveled all over the world, seeking information and confirming the hidden agenda of religion for the purpose of financial and political gain through mind control. It would be my great pleasure to share with you clips from some of our shows where we have dared to ask the questions: did Jesus really die for our sins? Who wrote the Bible? Who was Mary Magdalene? What really happens when we die? And what are the origins of homosexuality? In these shows, we also take on subjects like women in the Bible. Jesus was a medium. Sins are profitable, and crop circles. Sit back, fasten your seatbelts, and be ready to take a trip that will challenge each of you personally to open your minds. I present to you the best of Making Known the Unknown. And this is getting back to the title of our show, or the topic of our show, which is, did Jesus really die for our sins?
Jesus did not die for our sins. He died for the sins of the priest that shouted, "Crucify him," because he was such a threat to the priest at the time, because he had the gift of seeing in the future. It's known as remote viewing.
I've read also other accounts of the Council of Nicaea that these 318 bishops that came to this council all brought their Bibles with them. And their Bibles, again, were not exactly, today we go to, Bible's more or less the same. If you get the same version, it'll read the same. But back then there were differences within them. And this was some of the other things they were trying to iron out, was to come up with a more authorized text of the Bible. Mary Magdalene was a prophetess or a priestess of the god Isis in Egypt, and she understood the secrets of that society. And when the Bible talks about that she washed her hair, she took her hair and washed his feet. That was one of the ceremonies that was conducted with Isis, from what I understand. And so she was very psychically aware. She understood psychic science very well as Jesus did. and this is probably a bond that they shared. One of the reasons that they probably, decided to get married in the first place, because they had this common understanding.
Did you want to add something to that about what happens when people die?
Well, this world that we're on now, from birth to death, is actually a school. And then when we reach a point, we give up the physical body, which really gives birth to the spirit body, and we go into the other kingdom, and we continue learning in that dimension, you see. For truly this proves, as the spirit voices have told me, that being gay, as we use that term today, is not a choice. It's not a choice, it's a natural thing, because the soul in that man's body who is attracted to another male is a female soul. And so the soul in a woman's body who is attracted to another woman, has become masculinized. And there was never a time that women crossed over. It was men, that men crossed over. It was women that did it in the first place, but that was a law of the land set up by the priest. That's all there was to it.
On a whole, you don't see women having a central role of authority at all through the Bible. They're always kind of in a secondary position. Partially because the religions were patriarchal and they didn't want the women to be prominent, because it goes back to the conflict between the priest and the medium. The priests wanted total control. They wanted the people they wanted to be the intermediaries between the people and the spirit world, but most of them weren't gifted, and therefore the prophets were the gifted people. They were the ones that could hold a two-way conversation. When it talks about in Exodus chapter 33, it says that Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the tent, and anyone who had a question would go out to the tent of meeting and ask it to the Lord. Well, that's because they got a two-way conversation going. They would ask the question, and there was a medium there, and the spirit person would speak through the medium and give them an answer. So it was a two-way conversation between a physical person and someone in the other dimension. But the priests couldn't do that. They could imitate it, but they couldn't do it. So they were afraid of the women, and they didn't want the women to be in a place of authority, because it was more likely that a woman was a medium, because they are more sensitive to the spirit world and could bring forth messages. And this is why when Christianity was established and Paul came around, he in the 15th chapter of the book of Corinthians, it talks about a woman must be silent in the church.
My question to the viewers of this program, if the spirit world, the people in the spirit world spoke to all of these people all the way through that book, why don't they speak to us today? They do. But mediums have been put down, they've been burned at the stake, they've been butchered, they've been killed, they've been hung on the cross. He was a great medium. He was a wonderful medium. And that's what he tried to teach his 12 students in the upper room. It was a seance every single night.
But the thing that's even more dramatic is Jeremiah, because he lays the whole thing right out. And what he says in chapter 7, starting with verse 21, is, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat flesh. For I did not speak to your fathers or command them in the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt sacrifices." He's specifically saying Spirit or God did not ask for sacrifices. The priests put it in.
Let me tell you, too, something before we start with this.
Okay.
They said, I'm waiting till we got on the air to do this.
Go ahead.
They said, just as we have been producing these pictures, we're producing very advanced crop circles. We lived here on the planet a long, long time ago. And we want the people that sees these to know how advanced we are. But we want the people to know that we are afraid to show ourselves because we're afraid of the people, because the people they are ignorant. They only use a little bit of their brain. They make guns and bombs. They've got so many religions. People have gone crazy on the planet. We're afraid of the people, but we are leaving what people are used to knowing as their calling cards. So we're leaving calling cards. We are leaving pictures, and we're leaving crop circles. That's our calling cards. And when people gain knowledge on the planet, which they will after all the turmoil is over with, and people start accepting each other, and all the turmoil is over with here, and peace is on the planet, we will show ourselves. You will see our aeroships, and you will see us once again. We live in the 21st century, in the 21st universe, as well as many other universes. We are coming back to our home planet. The planet, the universe,
Emerald?
the emerald universe, which is our favorite universe. And they said that in the Milky Way, which this is on the edge of the Milky Way, there are 10 billion suns, and this is one of them. Show your pictures.
Okay, I guess
Thank
we could
you.
have the clip.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of their Saturday to come and be with us. I see that we are going to build this church one brick at a time, and that's just fine with me, because each one of those bricks is a very powerful brick. So thank you. I want to introduce myself. My name is Tina Tarryk. Really, a couple of years ago, no one would say producer and host at the end of my name. That was something that started out as a hobby a few years ago, and I found that I enjoy it. And of course, why wouldn't I enjoy it working with Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz? And of course, what a phenomenal topic to produce about. Tell you just a little bit about myself. I grew up pretty much like most of the families in my area of Connecticut, going to church on Sundays, different churches here and there. Eventually that faded off. My family didn't go as much. And as a young adult, I made some choices, traveled all around, experienced a lot of different religions, and nothing ever seemed true until I met Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz. Now, that has piqued my curiosity, and of course, beyond that, it's turned into producing things with them, including the seminar. The information that I have gathered by participating in the classes that they have held, I don't think I could have gathered in 100 lifetimes. And it has caused me to think twice about a lot of things that I never really thought much about growing up with respect to God. Where is God? Who is God? What is God? And of course, the seminar will endeavor to explain some of that to some of you. The other piece that I wanted to share with you is that a lot of people will say with respect to God that only priests are the mediaries who are allowed to speak to them. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. I would say that that's probably the most dramatic thing that I have learned thus far. And that, in fact, Spirit is everywhere with every one of us all the time. And it's a matter of development and opening your mind to be able to communicate with them and bridge that gap. So here we are, 2.5 years later, 60 plus TV programs in the Connecticut area, which we will be bringing to the Charleston area. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar, a couple nights ago we ran a program promoting this special event today, and there will be more. So keep your stations tuned, and not just in this area, any area we can take the program. What I also wanted to make you all aware of today, if you would open up your packets, for those of you who have packets, you'll see that there are a whole bunch of multicolored items in the packets. We had some fun putting those together. Think about it as your rainbow packet. The purple insert on the right-hand side is the program for today. Even though we had a little bit of a late start, we're going to stick to that as best we can. And if you read ahead, you can see there's probably some pretty exciting things yet to come. There will also, from time to time, be some videos, as you can see, and we have some wonderful masterpieces that we hope to uncover at some point in the day. The other items in your packet, the yellow piece, and I'm referring to the right-hand side of your packet with the pocket, that is a biography of Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz. There is also an affirmation booklet on the right-hand side, which is green. And there's a blue booklet, which is something that Sidney will explain to you shortly. Beyond that, on the left-hand side are some items that you can take a look at your leisure. And as we get closer towards other segments of the program, I'll call your attention to some of those. There's also a pen in all of your folders, should any of you feel inclined to take notes. Because I've also realized that some of this is really like a class. This is very much a school. There's an awful lot to learn. And at any time, if anyone has any questions about anything, please don't be shy. We'd be more than happy to answer those questions. Okay. With that, it would be my great pleasure to introduce to you Sidney Schwartz.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sidney Schwartz. I met Reverend Hewitt in 1975. It was Columbus Day weekend. One of my close friends in college, Bonnie, had gotten a teaching job in Waterford, Connecticut, which was the next town to where Mr. Hewitt lived. It's near New London, Connecticut, New London County. And she was teaching up there. I was teaching in New Jersey. And one of her colleagues was one of Reverend Hewitt's students at the time. And he had explained to her what Reverend Hewitt did, that he could go into the altered state of consciousness and communicate with the spirits of your loved ones and provide information about your future. And my friend used a expletive whose initials are BS. She said, that's impossible. And she says, you know what? He must have a whole team of researchers and investigators, private investigators, goes out and investigates you. And she says, I'm going to prove that he's a fraud. And she goes to her friend's house and she gives a false name and registers with Reverend Hewitt for a reading. 2 days later, the friend gets a phone call asking for the false name. she panics. She runs down to Bonnie's apartment. Bonnie, Reverend Hewitt's on the phone. He's asking for you. She goes in, and Reverend Hewitt's mad, and steam's coming out of his ears. He's saying, "You're not telling me the truth. You didn't give me your real name. I'm not reading for you." Her jaw dropped, and she did everything she possibly could to convince him to read for her, which she managed to do. I don't know how, because usually Reverend Hewitt's so stubborn, he can't change his mind. But she managed. I guess it was meant to be. So she had this reading, and it really blew her mind away. It blew her mind. And she went and she played the tape of the reading to me over the phone. And I became very excited, because I kind of always been inclined to this area. I was always interested in psychic phenomena and mediumship, but I was always afraid of being involved with a fraudulent person, so I would never go. So I booked a reading, and was very impressed with what I heard. I asked Carl questions, leaving half the information out. And he always filled in the missing pieces and gave me the answer. I was going, wow, this is pretty good. And 3 months later, I had a second reading, and 3 months after that, I had a third reading. And at the end of the third reading, Reverend Hewitt looks at me and says, he says, I can tell by your light, which is the auric field around everyone, that you have the potential of doing some good work here. He says, too bad you live so far away, because I live 120 miles from this house, because I'd invite you to be in my class. And I said, well, don't let that stop you. I said, I drive up here to attend your classes. So that started my treks to Chesterfield, Connecticut on a weekly basis. I would leave work at 3 o'clock. I was a school teacher. We got out at 3, hit the road, go through the traffic, arrive for time for class, and then turn around and go drive back home so I could be at work the next morning. And in my younger days, I was able to do that. Today, I don't quite have that stamina. But so that's how I began to get involved. And eventually, I started learning all different things, but the most important thing I started to learn was about mediumship in the Bible. And Tina, if you could turn the projector on and go into the PowerPoint. Okay. I forgot the remote control. That's my fault. It's a special button. It's over here. That'll turn left. Okay, and we need to get into the PowerPoint, and then just hit the first, get it to play.
International Research and Educational Society presents Tarryk Partridge, Jordan Maxwell, as special guest, Bill Jenkins.
It is at this point I would like to remind that you should always be aware of any authority, institution, government, church, religion, anyone who is in position of any authority that tells you that you should not read something in particular, or you should not look at a set of facts or a particular book. Because usually anyone in authority who doesn't want you to read something in particular must have something to hide. Because the intellectual mind of the human being cannot grow if it is not allowed to look at all of the facts.
That was a research group that presented an hour-long video about all kinds of research they were doing. A lot of it was similar to ours. Tina, if you can go into the PowerPoint, and we can start talking about, and you can leave that on, that's right. Oh. Okay, I can show it from here, okay. Tina got a crash course in this morning. Okay, mediumship in the Bible. We have a little fluky thing with your projector, so if you see me going like this, I'm cueing Tina to go to the next slide. One of the things that I began learning about in Reverend Hewitt's development classes was that everyone in the Bible was mediumistic. Now that to me was really surprising, because it was a different way to look at things. But what's even more surprising is the next quote. It says, about the gifts of the Spirit, there are some things I do not wish you to remain ignorant. This is 1 Corinthians 12:1. And another version of that verse is, fellow Christians, I want you to know about the gifts of the Spirit. This is an interesting version because it basically says, to be Christian, you should know about the gifts of the Spirit. Now, that's exactly the opposite of what has happened. St. Paul, who he was, most of you know, Paul was a Jew. His name was Saul. He was very much against this new Christian movement that had started, and he was going to Damascus to round up a bunch of people. And in Acts chapter 9, verse 1 through 9, the story is written about what happened to him on the road to Damascus. And what happened was that he saw a light, and he heard a voice, because he was riding along on his horse, you know, or walking along with his camel, one of the two. I wasn't there, I'm not sure his mode of transportation. And he was like it was hot. It's, you know, just like it is here in Charleston. It's so hot here and humid, you know. Well, it's a little drier in the Holy Land, but it's hot. And he's walking along, and he's thinking about Jesus and this new religion and how they're terrible because they think they believe the wrong stuff. And he's sending out all these negative vibes about this, you know. And Jesus, who was in spirit at the time, picks up on this, because thoughts are things, they're energy, and the spirit people are out there can pick up on that energy. So he picks up on this energy, and he says, you know, this guy's giving me a headache with all his negative thinking. So he goes and he makes himself known to Paul, and he presents his light of his spirit to Paul, who sees this light, and he talks in direct voice, which means that they all hear it, because people who are traveling have heard the voice too. They were looking around, just, where is the voice coming from? And the voice said to Paul, Paul, why are you persecuting me? And he's going, what? What's going on? You know, and he got really freaked out. And the experience was so traumatic that he became blind for 3 days. They had to take him to the city and rest for 3 days until he could see. But that was a very profound experience for Paul, because it made it real to him. He had a real psychic experience of seeing spirit and feeling its power. I've had a similar experience. You're going to be hearing us talk about Awan today. And Awan is the angel without a name. And in my first encounter with Awan, which is what that book is about, I was sitting there, and this spirit, I had spoken to quite a few spirits through Reverend Hewitt. He was a trance medium. And this spirit said to me he was an angel. And I said, yeah, right, you're an angel. You know, nobody else came through as an angel. You know, you have this spirit guide and that spirit guide. My grandmother came through, my father came through. Nobody's claiming an angel came through. And so I'm sitting there, and I don't have words to tell you what happened. I can simply say the whole energy of the room changed. I became frightened. And because I guess he did something to let me know he really was an angel on high. Because I had a physical reaction to what happened, similar to the physical reaction Paul that I didn't go blind. It wasn't to that extent, but something happened that I cannot put into words to let me know that this entity I was speaking to was not just a run-of-the-mill spirit person like my grandmother over in the spirit world. This came from a very high level and knew how to use the energy. So this is what happened to Paul, and this is why he became so adamant. This is why in this letter to the Corinthians in chapter 12, verse 1, I will not have you ignorant of the gifts of the Spirit, because he wanted to make this the whole basis of Christianity, spirit communication, because it was throughout the Bible. If we can have the next slide. Here we have a quote, and it says, take this, this quote is by Lyman Beecher. He was the father of Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was written in 1879, I believe. And it says, take out the spiritual phenomena out of the Bible, and you won't have much left worthwhile. I'm having trouble reading it because it's very small here. But anything except the lids. So you take the spiritual phenomena out of the Bible, what are you left with? You're left with a short list of man-made laws that were made by the priest, you know. Don't eat meat and milk, a lot of which people don't pay attention to anymore. These are the man-made laws of the priests, and that's it. The whole book, Spirit Communication. And this was known way back over 100 years ago. So why do most Christians and most Jews, they don't think about it either, and most people, why aren't they aware how important spirit communication is? I can't answer that question. Oh, I can't. Because in the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 in Nicaea, Turkey, there was a council, and they took all the gifts of the Spirit out of the Bible. And well, they didn't take it out of the Bible, they took it out of a practice. They forbid mediumships to be practiced in the church, because from the beginning of Christianity up to the year 325, mediums were in the church. There were no priests. There were no ministers. The people that conducted the services were mediums, and there was spirit communication. That's why in the 14th chapter of Corinthians, they talk about a whole list of how to run a seance and how to quote, prophesy, okay, how to communicate with spirit, because that's what the whole religion was about, but it changed at that point. I'm getting very long-winded, and I'm taking too much time. We're looking at Greece, aren't we? When you travel with Reverend Hewitt, you never know what to expect, because all sorts of phenomenal things happen with him, because he's such a phenomenal person. We were in Athens, Greece, and we took a trip to Greece, and we also went to Delphi. And we went to another, which is where the oracle sat. An oracle is another word for medium, or prophet, or seer, or mantis, or person in white clothing. There's all sorts of names that were used for these type of people. And so we went to another oracle site, which was way in the northwest corner of Greece. The oracle site was called Dodona. And while we were there, we saw some stuff, and then we were headed back home. And when we got there, as we were driving back, we saw this black car pass us. It was some sort of American car. A Jaguar? Jaguar. Yeah, it was a black Jaguar with Florida plates. Here we are in Greece. And there were some scenic overviews around. And then we stopped at the scenic overview of this picture. And I had the camera pointed, ready to take this picture. And I hear this woman yelling at me in Greek. And for some reason I got annoyed. And I felt like turning around with it and saying, "What's the matter with you, lady? I can't speak Greek," in that tone. But that's what was coming out of me for some reason. And I just turned to her and I said, "I don't speak Greek," in a polite tone, but that wasn't my intent. And then she said, "Can you tell me how to get to the ferry boat?" "What ferry boat?" She said, "Well, in the next town here, there's a ferry boat. She said, "Where are you going to?" And I said, "We're going to," and I heard the word Athens come out of my mouth, but that's not what I was going to say, because there was an oracle site in the local vicinity we were going to, but I said Athens. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I said, "That's strange, I wasn't going to say that." And she says, "Oh, if you're going to Athens, get on the ferry boat, and it cuts across the Peloponnesian peninsula there, and it's a much shorter trip." And we get out our map, and when we see that, it says, "Oh, if we do that, we can visit Corinth, we can visit Mysia," and we wanted to go there, but we didn't have time. Let's go there. So that's what we did. We got on this ferry boat, and we ended up in the seaside resort. This is the hotel we ended up staying, and this is a picture of the hotel. It was quite a grand place. It was kind of, I'm compared to Atlantic City because I'm near New Jersey. It was the seaside, Ocean Beach, probably Maryland, or what's close to here? Myrtle Beach? Myrtle Beach is close to here. It's very similar to Myrtle Beach. And, but it was off season, so the place was empty, deserted. And we find this hotel was finally open because most of the places were closed. And I ended up getting some food supplies. This is the backside of the hotel. Notice there's water there, okay? And there was a balcony there, and we were going to go on the balcony and have a bottle of wine, some cheese, and rest. And lo and behold, we look in the sky, and what do we see but this picture? And I look at it, and my mouth drops. And I said, "Look at that. I don't believe that's in the sky. I want you to open your packets. In your packets, we will find a blue booklet. I want you to look at the cover of that booklet. I want you to look at the picture on the screen." The cover of the booklet is the church program, the church logo that was given to Reverend Hewitt in 1978. And if you can see on the screen, there's a program from 1980. See the red arrows pointing to 1980? So this is legitimately happened way before the year 2000 when this picture was taken. We were looking at the church logo in the sky. Now the name of our church is the Gifts of Spirit. And Carl and I were so blown away because this was not the first strange happening on this trip for us. We were so blown away by this that that it took me 2 weeks to realize, 2 weeks after I came home, to say that this picture that we have here that logo in the sky was over the city of Corinth. And Corinth is where Paul was writing this to. So it gives me great pleasure right now to bring to you, so I get a little long-winded sometimes, to bring to you, oh, one more thing I need to explain to you. Psalm 100 says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, and whatever else it says there, because I can't see the screen. Basically, what this verse was put in the Bible for is as follows. Okay, when a medium is working, it's quite important for it to keep the vibrations and the energy up in the room. One way to do that is to sing, but don't worry, we're not going to make you sing today. But what we are going to ask you to do is to clap as loudly as you can when we start a segment, because that helps to bring the energy in the room up. When that happens, the spirit people that are here, and I'm sure there's more spirit people here than there are physical today, and that helps us to communicate with the spirit people much better, and it helps us to speak better. So it's my great pleasure and honor to present to you at this time Reverend Carl R. Hewitt.
Good morning.
Morning.
Let's see, I gotta get started. I'm anxious to know what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, well, there's two things here, something very familiar to everybody. I have two of them. You know, there's something that I've always wanted to see. Because you know, there's a lot in this world that we do not see, we take for granted, and yet there's a dimension, there's another dimension here that you're going to be learning a lot about. Because the spirit people told me that there was a few people in the Charleston area that will become teachers, and there are people waiting in the future for you to teach them. And so I want you to keep that in mind. Jesus came to the world, and it was his teachings, it was his gifts of the Spirit that caused a lot of attention. Now, some of you may know this. I was born and raised in the little town of Charlotte, North Carolina, 135 miles from here, off of Route 17. I'm the 11th child of a poor farm family, and it seems that things started happening at the house when I was conceived, strange things. But you see, the people in spirit that I was with in the other dimension before I came into physical form, they were starting to try to make contact with my relatives, my family, so they would recognize them. But because of their teachings and listening to the recycled ignorance from the people at the time, they thought this was the boogeyman. And I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. And so, as a little boy, where I was sleeping, let's say I was sleeping here in this bed, and we get up in the morning, and there'd be all kind of writing on the wall. I hadn't even gone to school here, and I got blamed for this, even though it was not English. My father used to say it was an unknown tongue, and so these people were writing during the night. They did everything possible to get my parents to recognize the fact that I was different, as they say, from other people, because I was born here to hear spirit, which is having the gift of clairaudient, clear hearing. The gift of clairvoyance is seeing, perhaps in another time frame. And so I had a lot of problems with that. And then when I went to church, when I went to school the first day, something very strange happened, and then I wound up the county nurse taking me to the doctor in Wilmington, having my eyes tested and my ears tested, and they found nothing wrong. And about a week later, she came back and got me again, never answering a question. Never. I asked, where are we going? What is this about, you know? And never telling me anything. There was another car that was beside of her car with 4 men in it, and they were all preachers. And I sent me to Duke University to have my ears tested, eyes and everything else. because I didn't find this out until 40-some odd years later, that they were trying to get a reason to have a lobotomy performed on me and put me in an insane asylum for the rest of my life. So I'm down here to teach because something wonderful happened here back in April of 1982. And what happened here was a message, and that message has come true to the letter. It was in 1982 that we had a seance here, and the message came through, which is called precipitated writing, precipitated art. And the message was, you'll be the guiding star of his existence in the near future. Well, I never thought I was worthy of this because of having these strange things happening to me all my life. I had to deal with this, so I didn't have much confidence in myself. And coming to this point, to get the message across, there's two things that I've always wanted a picture of. One, and so I brought two cameras. One, if there's anybody in the room that feels that they can take the camera and go outside and take a picture of the wind, I'd love to see it. If any of you think you could take a picture with the other camera on the inside and take a picture of the oxygen that we breathe, I'd love to see it. Here are two things that we take for granted, and yet we would not live but only a few moments without the oxygen. And we certainly wouldn't want to do without the wind, although it gets angry once in a while and tries to blow us away. So there's a lot of things in life that we take for granted and don't give any thought. And so I'll be talking to you about the two dimensions later on, because there are two dimensions. There is the kingdom of man, which we all live in, and then there's the kingdom of God, which is invisible. So when you look in the mirror in the morning, and you see yourself, you're looking at a temple of the living God. That's it. Jesus came to the world to teach, and he taught me, this is a heavy statement now, he taught me exactly what I'm going to be teaching you people. This is what I've been teaching all the time. It's not coming from me, it's not coming from a book, it's not coming from anyone else in the physical being. It's coming directly from the other dimension. He is alive and well and lives in another dimension, but he will not allow himself to be seen here because of the ignorance that runs rampant. And they're talking to me right here that I have to mention the viruses. There are two viruses on this planet, and once the person gets that virus, it's shut down completely. And so there are millions beyond count number of people that are dying and going into the other dimension, and they're absolutely lost. They do not have any, they do not have their passport with them, which is knowledge. Knowledge is stored in your soul. So I'm going to get into this a little bit later, and I want you to listen. I want you to listen, because your homework is going to be to teach others slowly. Spoon feed them. Go from a small spoon to a tablespoon to a shovel to a bulldozer, because the world is in a mess, and there's very few people out there to carry this forward. You people are selected. You wonder why no one else is here, just a small group? You're selected. There are people waiting in the future, far more people than you can imagine. They're waiting for you to teach them what you're going to learn today. Okay.